Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. This is the October 26th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting for the City of Malden. I would like to call this meeting to order. Would you please call the roll, Mr. Deerhog?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Commissioner Foreman,
Present.
Commissioner Paglialunga,
Present.
Commissioner Sofield,
Present.
and joining us by Zoom, Commissioner Barefoot,
Present.
Commissioner Woolard,
Present.
and our chairman, Commissioner Paulson.
Present.
And please note that our commissioner, Mr. Ong, was not available to be here.
Would you all please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, republic, and stand, one nation, God.
Thank you. Also, thanks for all the other members of city leadership attending the meeting tonight. Tonight's meeting is being held to consider the following agenda items. We're going to review and approve the Planning Commission meetings from our minutes from our August meeting. We're going to review a rezoning at 513 North Main Street, and we're going to do a preliminary plat review for Maverick Yard. If you're here for any item not listed on the agenda, we'll not be able to discuss that during our meeting tonight. But you're welcome to talk to one of us after the meeting or contact one of our city staff members during regular business hours. Tonight, we're going to do our best to maintain professionalism and courtesy throughout the meeting, and we ask all of us here to do the same. Please refrain from talking, clapping, or other disturbances. There'll be time provided for all members of the public to speak during each business item on the agenda that we discuss tonight. Also, please silence all your devices. We're going to begin with a review and approval of the minutes from the August Planning Commission meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion to approve.
Thank you. I have a motion from Commissioner Foreman to approve the August minutes. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
I have a second from Commissioner Sofield. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'd like to call for a vote. Mr. Deerhog, could you help me with a roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We'll start on Zoom. Commissioner Barefoot,
Aye.
Commissioner Woolard,
Aye.
Commissioner Foreman,
Aye.
Commissioner Paglialunga,
Aye.
Commissioner Sofield. Aye. Commissioner Paulson.
Aye.
That passes by a vote of 6-0.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda tonight is a review and discussion of rezoning at 513 North Main Street. We're going to begin with an introduction from staff. Following that introduction, I'll ask any members of the commission if they need to disclose any conflicts of interest or ex parte communication regarding this item. After this, the applicant will be given an opportunity to comment on their application if they need to. Following the applicant's comments, we'll open the floor to public comment. Members of the public who wish to comment will be granted up to 3 minutes to speak. You'll only be allowed to speak once, and we do not permit speakers to concede time to other speakers. If someone else has already stated your position, we ask that you simply state that you agree with the previous comment. This will help move the meeting along. We ask that everyone be respectful of each person who speaks and refrain from talking, clapping, or other disturbances. After each person who wishes to speak will have had their turn, we're going to close the floor to public comment. We'll provide the applicant with an opportunity to provide any comments if they desire. After this, we'll get a recommendation from staff. Mr. Deerhog, will you please discuss this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to use some visuals to help show where this is located. The city has received a petition requesting the rezoning of a tract of land that's in the city of Malden. The petition includes approximately 5 acres, and it fronts on Knollwood Drive. This property, and this petition actually involves 2 properties, but they are tied together by ownership. Portion of the property that runs along North Main Street and is the location of 513 North Main Street is currently zoned C2, which is a general commercial district. The portion of the property behind this is along Knollwood Drive. It's currently zoned R15, which is a residential district. They have requested to reshape the C2 zoning a little bit on this property and to rezone the back part for a mixed residential zoning district. The intent for that rezoning is to allow the development of a townhome project that the applicant is proposing. That townhome project will be integrally designed with a commercial project along the front portion of the property. And the applicant is here tonight, and as soon as I'm done talking, I think he will share a little bit more about their intent for the development of this property. Just a little bit about the proposed development. The applicant's planning for a walkable mixed-use development project. As I indicated, that will consist of commercial on the front portion of the site and attached single-family homes or otherwise townhomes on the back portion of the site. It's going to be a high priority for the applicant, as they've indicated, that the commercial and the residential development will be very walkable and have a high level of pedestrian connectivity. The commercial development is being planned to be constructed as a 2-story building with careful architectural design placed along North Main Street with the parking in the rear. The commercial development is expected to include family-oriented restaurants. The applicant has described a vision of bistro-type restaurants among other types of uses. The applicant envisions a restaurant focused on serving breakfast and lunch with another more focused on dinner. The applicant also envisions outdoor patio dining and maybe possibly some rooftop dining. The residential development is being planned as a townhome community oriented around a central green. The central green will be an active outdoor space to be used for gatherings and passive recreation. The central green will be the focal point of the residential project. The applicant anticipates constructing about 36 townhomes on this site. And after this rezoning, if it's approved by City Council, the townhome portion of the development would need to come back to the Planning Commission, again, for a public hearing and further public review. One last note about this application. In the early stages of this development design, city leaders and staff approached the applicant about the possibility of realigning Knollwood Drive so that it aligns with Murray Drive and creates a 4-way signalized intersection at North Main Street instead of the current alignment of offset intersections at North Main Street. At the request of the city staff, the applicant has designed a layout that achieves this realignment. The applicant's proposal would entail extending Devon Drive beyond its current intersection with Knollwood Drive and aligning it with Murray Drive. The intent for this new 4-way intersection would be to be upgraded with a traffic signal. This would provide Knollwood residents with a controlled intersection, making it easier to turn left on North Main Street or to cross over North Main Street onto Murray Drive. SCDOT has commented that the existing portion of Knollwood Drive between North Main Street and Devon Drive need to be closed to through traffic in order to accommodate this realignment. And I think the applicant will have some slides here that will show that a little bit better. That concludes the introduction that staff's prepared for this item, and certainly we can get into a little bit more about our analysis later on for this agenda item.
Thank you. Before we continue, I'm going to ask all members of the commission if they have any conflicts of interest or ex parte communication regarding this item to disclose. Hearing none, is there a representative from for the applicant here?
Good evening, everybody, for consideration for the application for rezoning. The fact of what development group is looking to do with this property, highly trying to target it and focus it more around a community environment. As I mentioned a minute ago, it is desired to make sure that this project stay within a community feel and be very walkable. It's a lot of things to achieve with SDOT to be able to achieve some of those items to achieve that.
Thank you.
You want me to run through and show these slides? Okay. So the slides that the applicant provided to share tonight, this gives a little aerial overshot of where we're looking at, and it's turned around from the earlier map that I shared, but this is the front portion of the property that would be commercial, and this is the back portion of the property that would be rezoned for mixed residential zone classification. This is North Main Street running top to bottom on this page. There's Murray Drive, where my hand is right there, and then this is Knollwood Drive. So we oriented with that. This is the proposed layout that they've shown. That would be the intent for the design. I apologize, the commercial part is a little off the map there, but you can see that's the part labeled as not part of this rezoning. It's all rezoned commercial. But the part that you're seeing here is the residential portion of the development. And again, you can see the central green that the townhomes are all configured around facing. They've also shown their intent to provide some level of buffering around the perimeter of the project. This is conceptual of what the residential project would look like. And then this shows some different concepts that they plan to incorporate in the project. Again, you see on the top left, the idea of the central green that the townhomes would face. Top right, I may need you to come back up, Sebastian, and tell us what we're looking at the top right. But the bottom pictures, again, just kind of give different visuals of look they're trying to achieve the project.
So, yes, as David's saying, the idea is to build a central community around Central Park so that family members have a place to enjoy their own space, and not only that, but be able to walk to the commercial aspect and enjoy dining. As it was mentioned earlier on, the connectivity of realigning Knollwood Drive is also coming with the conversation of trying to create a pedestrian-friendly crossing over North Main Street. It will tie pedestrians between Knollwood and this community crossing town.
Anything else?
That's your last slide. Did you want to comment any on this?
Obviously, to try and respect the community around us, we don't want to come in, and the goal is to preserve as many possible of trees and vegetation on the property. We are faced with topography, working as we can into bringing in the development. We do want to show a level of respect to the community around us as well by providing good buffer space, not only for the residents of the townhome community, but as well to help employees and feel like it nestles into this area very well.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open the floor to public comment regarding this item. I'm going to get the sign-in sheet and I'll call names, and you can approach the lectern and please share your thoughts. Harold Moon.
And, Mr. Chairman, I'll just comment that you indicated there's a 3-minute limit, so I'll be checking the time. If you hear this goes off, that just means your time's up if you'll just kind of wrap up.
Thank you.
Good evening. 3 minutes.
This won't count against your time.
Appreciate that. Is that loud enough? Good. I live at 112. I live at 112 Devon Drive. One house from the stop sign. And these are things I would like for the city to consider. Not trying to stop progress. Working on traffic. Hopefully that's going to come through. With DOT's permission, and hope it's not dependent on DOT funding. That's a question. Funding source for the alignment, the city and the developer kicking anything in to the reset. Another thing, city, please keep this in mind. Trash collection for the timing permissible. Those things make a lot of noise. Dollar Tree put there, and it will wake you up at 4 o'clock in the morning with boom and a bang. Just letting you know. And we're talking about going forward, so let's go forward together. See if we can't get that under control. For the rezoning, making sure that in the PD or whatever is going on, time of the trash pickup. Had a decent time. I think we had an ordinance one time said you couldn't do it before 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't know if that still stands. Was a part of the zoning criteria at one point in time. Another thing that I'd like to ask, the question is, what are the size of the air and heat handlers that's going to be in the commercial area? I'm talking noise pollution. There are different type of compressors that could be used. Some of them could be extremely loud that would be a discomfort to the residents, and we would hear it all the time, all day and all night. So please, let's make sure in the design that the most quietest heat and air units are put in because it's extremely close to the residential houses. Next thing I have is the open space. Is that going to be private or public? And the reason I'm mentioning that is I walked that block a whole lot already. And I can tell you what you get from the tattoo shop, the pawn shops, the clubs, the liquor shops, and all of the high density, I'm going to say economical residential area. You get a lot of walking traffic. So I want to know is that the park open area, is it going to be open to the public? If do, it's just going to fill up with the drifters and the night walkers and the things of that nature. Just keep that in mind. We're gonna need some rules and some regulations on that space. I can tell you this, I live at 112 Devon, and I have to keep the underside of my house locked to keep in the wintertime the people with the bags from going under your house sleeping. I'm just a resident, just letting you know what's on the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
And, the noise, the rooftop restaurant noise that's going to be emitted from that place. That's a question mark on that it doesn't become noise pollution and something that disturbs the resident continuously. It already significant problems at the corner with the existing entertainment, grill and bar areas. They can get out of, oh, how can I tell you, it can get out of hand. They can play that music, boom, boom, bam, bam, and the motorcycles coming in and screaming and expositional driving. So for the rooftop noise control, need to be a level set.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. Richard Baker.
I'm Richard Baker, and I have the opposite situation, what the gentleman before me had. I live in the back of Knollwood, but I still use the street, Knollwood, all the way down, and there's a couple of issues that I think need to be considered. This is very quick. One, I think the idea of the street being diverted to where it crosses across to Murray is not a bad idea, actually, because in reality, traffic has been an issue, even with the situation of the store going in there. And if a restaurant goes in there, we just need a little bit more, a little better traffic flow in the area. So I think that that's a positive situation. I would be concerned about the noise if I lived up there too. Okay. But of course I can't hear it from where I am, but I think that's a consideration that we need to be concerned about. And then one other issue, that green zone that we're talking about putting where the road is now, one consideration when that happens is a simple fact that we have a lot of people that walk that road, and we have actually children that actually bike down through there and walk to that new store. Yeah, my wife's shaking her head. She also is a triker, and so it's one of those situations that it would be good for when you put the green zone in. Otherwise, it's going to be a very high maintenance green zone because of people taking shortcuts across it to get from Knollwood to the store that they're used to going to. So a bike path or something like a bike path or a walking path would be good there to take care of that and cut down on what might not be so green after a year or so there. But otherwise, as long as we can keep the noise down, it doesn't appear like the traffic for us in Knollwood would be any greater. In fact, it could be less for people turning out of the Dollar Tree and trying to take a shortcut around Devon and those areas up there. But I think it overall is positive. I wasn't too sure about the rezoning back here, but now that I've seen the photos, it looks like there's going to be some care taken as to how all that's installed. So overall, I'm positive about the situation.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. One thing, you were at 214 Anders?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry to everyone in attendance. I should have mentioned to state your name and your address when you come up to the lectern.
Okay. I should. Yeah. That's clear in the back. Okay.
Dick Thompson.
Hi, I'm Dick Thompson. I live at 105 Wellington Drive. It's one street removed from the infamous Devon. So I've talked to several folks about the development. I attended the previous meeting that was held to discuss this whole thing. And some aspects of it sound fine, sound pretty good. The thing that concerns me and some of the other folks I've talked to is there are a lot of aspirations, goals, promises. I feel like we don't really have any guarantee that what we're signing up for is going to be what's delivered. For instance, stoplight, Still not approved by DOT, if I understand it correctly. To me, if that's not installed, if that's not included, if it's not a deal breaker, it's a major impediment to corporation. Because a lot of people are looking at this thing. You're going to have 35 additional families out there, and there's going to be a lot of extra traffic. So just need to make sure that things really flow through. The other thing is that at the previous meeting, we discussed the fact that, or the understood fact that all these townhomes were going to have deed restrictions so that they were to be sold as opposed to just being rented. I would hope that those deed restrictions are in fact real and come to pass. I would also hope that those deed restrictions would keep people from buying the properties, then subletting them, going deviant or deviously around it, and we end up with a different class of people. I have just the other concerns. I mean, the gentlemen have already spoken about the noise, spoken about the infrastructure being able to handle it, and another aspect that was raised earlier was that there's going to be a stormwater analysis made, make sure that there was adequate stormwater coverage. I haven't heard anything yet about the progress of that. So I guess in summary, I'd say that it's not a bad concept. All of us people with gray hair have trouble with change. So I understand that, and I admit to having gray hair. Nonetheless, we'd like to see an improvement made. See this thing end up being an improvement for the community, not a detriment. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks. That's all the names I have on the sign-up sheet. Is anybody else here who'd like to speak regarding this item? Okay, I'm going to close the floor to public comment. Does the applicant wish to add any closing comments?
Would just like to make a note that has been discussed, that obviously between storm, drainage, and trying to work target plan. As for community and everything else, we definitely do plan to deed restrict these properties. We do plan to make this investment portfolio of somebody that's definitely is targeted towards a family community and something between ownership. We can obviously discriminate towards buying properties, but we want to restrict the fact that it's to investment property.
Do any members of the commission have any questions for the applicant?
Restriction, what we're looking at doing is setting a time. I understand a lot of people buy property as young families, and sometimes putting the deed restriction, it forces it more. It's not just some out of state occupant buying property. Is a primary opportunity. So if say for instance an individual was relocating, someone wants to relocate, it allows them to rent it out for a period of time, but after that they either have to sale or they have. So it is common in some town communities. We see a lot happening now. It's done at the beginning development stage, and it's desired to do that. Once done so, it's locked in. So it's deed restricted. Yes, 100%.
Just a reminder, make sure your mic's on.
Any more questions from the commission for the applicant? All right, thank you. Mr. Deerhog, will you please present the recommendation of staff, please?
Sir, thank you, Mr. Chair. And it was referred to earlier that there was a neighborhood meeting for this project. They held that on September 22nd. There was probably about 30 to 40 neighbors who attended that meeting, not including the city staff members and the applicant. Much of that discussion, from what I took notes on, focused on the reconfiguration of Knollwood Drive and Devon Drive, the traffic perhaps related to the project, stormwater concerns, setbacks, buffering, property values, and the types of businesses that could potentially occupy the commercial portion of the development project. And you should have received a summary of that neighborhood meeting that was provided by the applicant. With any rezoning, we don't have any specific criteria in the city zoning ordinance that states what the rezoning needs to meet. However, there are some criteria that we typically try to evaluate as we evaluate a rezoning. So I'm going to run through these 5 criteria briefly. First has to do with the comprehensive plan. And this property, again, it spans from Main Street and goes back along Knollwood Drive. On the comprehensive plan, it's designated as a community corridor along Main Street at this section, and is also indicated as part of the city center in the future land use map of the comprehensive plan. Community corridors described in that plan is intended for moderate commercial uses, including professional offices, office parks, mixed-use developments, restaurants, and small retail centers. Big box retail centers are inappropriate in these corridors. And access and connectivity, including pedestrian orientation, are highly promoted in that plan. And the applicant's proposal for a mixed-use development at this tract certainly is consistent and in line with what the comprehensive plan has outlined. The next criteria regards the suitability of the site, in particular relating to items such as floodplains and wetlands and steep topography. There is some topography that the applicant noted that they'll have to plan around, but otherwise there's no floodplains or wetlands that we are knowledgeable of yet at this site. The next criteria pertains to the compatibility of the development. This tract is located along the Main Street corridor, and then it backs into a residential community. The proposed mixed-use development with commercial development along the front and attached single-family housing on the back portion represents a reasonable transition between the 2 different effects that you have going on at this property and surrounding it. The infrastructure is the next criteria, and there will be some improvements that will be required by the applicant to make to the sewer system for the development of this tract. And they're working with our Public Works Department right now on making sure they have a handle on what their improvements will be that they'll need to make. All the other utilities are available at the site. And the last criteria relates to the public need. And city leaders have expressed a vision of seeing the city center area redeveloped with a higher standard of design and pedestrian orientation. The proposed mixed-use development of this tract is consistent with that vision. The proposed development will provide both a high-quality housing product as well as an engaging dining experience. The express priorities of the developer are to provide a carefully thought-out design community with strong pedestrian connections and a sense of place. And that concludes our evaluation of this rezoning request.
Thank you. Do any members of the commission have any questions for staff?
Mr. Chair, if I could have a question for staff, and maybe this is something for the applicant if staff's unable to answer. seems overall, like on the whole, it's a good plan. Looks like they've got some good ideas here. The question I have is, was a plan development, a PD considered for this site? Is there a reason why we're going at it this way, rezoning to the multifamily and not touching the front? I ask because we're taking a bit of a leap of faith. I mean, obviously we believe in good faith with our development community. I just want to ask if there was those discussions to give the city a little bit more of a control over the final design elements.
So I can answer that. At the beginning, when they were exploring what type of zoning that they would need, certainly both options were made available to them, and chose to stick with keeping the commercial zoning along the front and just changing the back part. So I think that appealed to the applicant more for the following the simplicity of that approach. That way they're not messing around with what they've already done in front as far as the current zoning goes. But I'll add this to PD zoning works out fine at the beginning when you're looking at the design of a project. One of the challenges that we run into a lot of times with PD zoning is they're not, the planned development districts are not set up well necessarily to manage the property over the life of the development. And so we didn't necessarily try to persuade the applicant to chase the PD zoning just from that standpoint, because the management of the property gets a little bit more difficult in the long run. When it's a PD, you have challenges of trying to figure out what can the homeowner do, what they can't do, because a lot of times those standards aren't incorporated directly into the plan.
Additional questions for staff?
Mr. Deerhawk, I have a question about the reconfiguration of the C2 zoning. Obviously, the reconfiguration doesn't follow the parcel line. So will the parcel be reconfigured with the site plan submittal? And I'm assuming, I guess, if a new right-of-way is developed through the parcel, that will kind of be in line with that process. Is that correct?
The zoning boundary there will follow what the new parcel configuration will be after they split out to projects, commercial versus residential.
Okay. And then my second question is the rezoning to an RM1. Would it be possible to do that as a conditional zoning and have some sort of conditions attached to that stipulate traffic control and realignment?
I'm not familiar with that necessarily. I may defer to Mr. Foreman if he has any other experience with that, but I've typically not been involved with the conditional.
I think conditional zonings, I guess, are typically more tied to the use, but I guess I'm just asking in broad terms, is it possible to tie any conditions to a rezoning from anything outside of just a use, allowable use?
Don't believe so.
Okay.
This isn't the first time we'll be meeting regarding this development. Is that correct?
Once the rezoning is approved, in order for them to be able to develop the townhomes, they'll be subdividing that property. So the preliminary plat for doing that subdivision will need to come back to the planning commission for review and approval. That will involve another public meeting that the public will attend and comment on.
So has there been any thought into protecting the neighbor that has the pond? I know it's more in the land use side than the rezoning, but has that been discussed at all? Is there any reason to believe that he might take some of the overflow of water?
They have been looking carefully at that. I'm actually going to turn to your team, Mr. Carter, if you want to talk about what you've been looking at and considering with that.
So during the neighborhood planning meeting, we did speak with the adjacent property owner because that topography or his property doesn't allow us to steer any water runoff or anything towards his pond. Hence, we have the drainage pond at the bottom. At the neighborhood planning meeting, it was brought our attention of issues in other developments in the history that have had to large scale runoff and wash away. So it was brought to our attention to make sure that the retainage pond on site would be adequate to hold a good amount of storage to make sure that but the only thing that's come back with the adjacent neighbor is obviously with that pond being so close to the property line, maintaining a level of safety or separation between the two. Ways to make sure between vegetation, changing the topography of the property line to kind of create a bit more of a separation barrier. That pond, obviously, we're not able to keep anybody from climbing a fence or anything on that matter, but our goal is to make sure that we
I have a question for you, Mr. Applicant, while you're up here. Assuming that the Devon Drive does go through, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Deerhog. Assuming that does get reconfigured, the existing Knollwood Drive, it's not entirely clear to me. Does that then become an ingress egress point for Dollar Tree and the new commercial site, or will that be taken off and just completely use as green space?
So I apologize that you can't see it quite on this screen because it cuts off, but there will be the front portion of Knollwood that goes into the parking lot or goes to the parking lot driveway of Dollar Tree. That front portion would remain so that the customers for Dollar Tree can still come in off of Main Street and access the parking lot that way. But then once you get past the driveway to the parking lot, coming back to Devon Drive, that portion of the road would be taken out, would be restored back to green space. And as they've laid out here too, would include trails, probably walking or biking trails and walking trails through there so that there's still pedestrian and bicycle access for the neighborhood to go to Dollar Tree. Just if they're going to drive there, they're going to go around a different way.
Thank you.
Mr. Deerhog, who will assume ownership of the abandoned right-of-way?
Typically, the way that's done is that when a right-of-way is abandoned, it's abandoned to the adjacent property owners. That would be probably the configuration here, unless the city maintains it as a park. The city could retain that right-of-way, the ownership of the right-of-way, and perhaps that's what happens. But that has not been determined.
Is Knollwood Drive a city street?
That portion is, yes.
So the city's going to be taking on that responsibility of that new road, correct?
The new road would be a city road.
Where's the garbage pickup for these individuals? Maybe a single can?
Typically for townhomes like this, they would have roll carts issued by the Public Works Department, and the City Public Works Department would pick up the trash like they do to a regular neighborhood.
The commercial aspect, trash and Mr. Terry dumpsters. It's much more do just an area screen.
Is that located on here now?
That has not come up to it now, but with the closing of that section of Knollwood Drive and being into a green space, as you can see, and unfortunately it's not in the picture there, but there is sidewalk access still connecting the main road through that green space. It will allow for that first portion of Knollwood Drive coming up the Main Street to be now classed as commercial road and be allowed for access to the Dollar Tree along with commercial deliveries to the commercial sector of that portion of the building. And that will keep Knollwood Drive access separate from portions and allow texture and frame.
Just to confirm, the green space that's going to be put on Knollwood, that's going to divert back to the city, correct?
The lot that's going to be shut down.
Yes.
There hasn't been a conversation that's been back in the city. The last response we had was divided between the two adjacent properties. So I guess it was just talking to the city and looking at where the boundaries are, the property maintenance and where everything would lie between that. If not, as originally discussed, it would be divided into properties and so.
In fact, what will happen is it would get split between the two property owners and then the city might maintain an easement for sidewalk or the pathway that goes through there for bicycle pedestrians.
Would be added on to the parcel IDs, or they be separate? I guess the concern would be
They
is who's
get
going to
added
maintain
on, I
it.
think typically.
I guess the concern would be, I'm sure it would be beautiful at first, but who's going to maintain it? Who pays for that?
So the easement helps with that aspect of it in a way, but there may be landscaping beyond the easement that needs maintenance. Certainly that may be a conversation that keeps going.
Any more questions from the commission?
I have one additional question. I know this is sketch plan level for the purposes of the rezoning, so it's not a final site plan, but I did want to ask Mr. Deerhog if there was going to be guest parking required for a townhome development of this size, just because at this level of plan, it's not shown. I know that can obviously change, but I just wanted to make sure that there would be, so that a high density residential development next to the single family neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of overflow parking from guests spilling out onto the neighborhood streets.
And the applicant may have more to say about this, but I think what they're looking at right now is to share that parking behind the commercial area. And that might provide some overflow for guests.
Okay, and do you feel that that would be enough for both?
Obviously, you can see this is just conceptual at this point.
Sure, yeah.
Parking counts will exactly be yet.
Okay.
Sure, visitor parking, but they would try and maintain handicap accessible visitor parking priority in space of the property.
Any more discussion? Okay, thank you. Just to kind of sum things up, we've been talking about rezoning at 513 North Main. The current zoning is R15 residential and C2 general commercial. The proposed requested zoning is RM1 residential and C2 general commercial. Do I hear a motion regarding this item?
I'll make a motion to approve this rezoning.
I have a motion from Commissioner Woolard to approve the rezoning. Do I hear a second?
A second.
I have a second from Commissioner Barefoot. Any last minute discussion? I'd now like to call for a vote. Mr. Deerhog, will you please help me with a roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. We'll start here in the room. Commissioner Foreman.
Aye.
Commissioner Pagliulunga.
Aye.
Commissioner Sofield.
Aye.
Let me switch over to our Zoom meeting. Our Zoom invites Commissioner Barefoot,
Aye.
Commissioner Woolard,
Aye.
and then finally our chairman, Commissioner Paulson.
Aye,
That passes by a vote of 6-0.
thank you.
So this will now proceed on to the city council, who will take up the recommendation of the planning commission.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda tonight is a preliminary plat review for Maverick Yards. Going to follow the same procedure and schedule as last time. Mr. Deerhog, will you please introduce this item?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The city has received a preliminary plat to review for the townhouse project known as Maverick Yards. The applicant is proposing to develop and subdivide this tract for 45 attached single-family homes on this 6.5 acre tract of land. And I have pulled up on the map here the location of this project. It's located along Jenkins Street and Jenkins Court, right off of North Main Street, and butting right up against the railroad tracks there. You can see this is on the same block as we sit on currently as a location of City Hall. So this block that we're sitting on extends from Butler Road up to Jenkins Street. The tract is located in what's been termed as the City Center project area. This tract in particular is the former site of the Malden Public Works Vehicle Maintenance Yard. This tract is being sold by the city to the Parker Group. And in addition to this townhome project that we're reviewing the preliminary plat for, the applicant will also be developing a food hall with indoor pickleball courts on the property immediately adjacent to this site. And the applicant's here, and he may go over a little bit more about this project, but this is a conceptual rendering of the food hall project that will be right next door to this, along with their rendering of their indoor pickleball courts. And then this is the overall site plan. It may be a little hard to see on here because of small detail, but the north end of this project is where the townhomes are being proposed, and this is what you are reviewing tonight, is the preliminary plat for the townhome project. And right below it to the south, this is the location of the food hall and the pickleball courts. So they'll be right next to one another. And this is a little bit more magnified view of the townhome project that you're reviewing.
Thank you. Does any member of the commission have any conflict of interest or ex parte communication regarding this item to disclose? Hearing none, does a representative for the applicant have anything to add at this time?
Good evening. Drew Parker with the Parker Group Development. Just wanted to introduce myself. I haven't met most of you, but I'm excited to get to know you. And also, we're very excited about getting this project underway soon. So this portion of the project is the residential component. It's going to consist of 45 townhomes that will be for sale. Will be, as you know, that site is a current public works warehouse area. It's got some environmental issues and other things that we need to take care of first, but ultimately will become a great place for people to live and work and play. So very excited about this portion of it. If you have any specific questions, I'm happy to address anything you see there on the plan. I know this is the preliminary, but good time to talk it through. We want to make sure this is something that everyone's proud of. So,
We'll probably have some questions for you after the public comment section.
sounds good.
The floor will now be open for public comment regarding this item. I have one name on the sheet here. When I call your name, please give your name and address and share your comment. Walter McPhail.
Before my 3 minutes start,
I'd like to know if this preliminary site plan date of it. I have 7/1/21, what's before me.
The date that's marked on the signature appears to be September 28th, 2021.
Look at that.
Well, this right now is the public comments part of the meeting, but I'll be glad to show you this after the meeting.
Well, it depends on where we are right here. I'm Walter A. McPhail. I live at 409 Piney Grove and Malden, and I own McPhail Animal Hospital, and I've been there 42 years. The building has been there 50 years, built by R.V. Chandler, who owned the property on the left, the right, and the thumbs up property. I have several major concerns. One is the parking. My people, if y'all know where we are, they come in and park in front of my office. Van Broad gave me a parking drawing, conceptual, like Fountain Inn has, for 3 parallel parking spots in my place. That will reduce me from 15 parking spots to 3, the way this thing is drawn out, okay? You do that, you're putting me out of business. I have 10 people that work for me. We cannot function with parallel parking. R.V. Chandler designed and built this building to start with. He paved it. He also paved Jenkins Street and the thumbs up property, laundry property. I suggest that we maintain that as it is right now, because we park a little bit off the property. The tail end of the cars is on RV's property, but we have been parking there for 50 years like that. So I have a vested interest in where we're parking. So I need y'all to consider that. Do not put a sidewalk across it, because there is no sidewalk on Jenkins Street to connect to. If you start a sidewalk, you start at thumbs up, laundromat, and go south. The other option, due to a time limit, is I believe on the map that I have here, that the survey that y'all have done takes 11 feet of my property on Jenkins Street at the entrance to it. My plat goes back to 74, and I have documentation on that. So that is my primary concerns, is number one, parking to be maintained, and like we have been, and make sure the boundaries are correct. Be glad to go over that with any time, with anybody. Any questions?
We may have discussion later.
Would appreciate it, Mr. Paulson.
Thanks, Doc.
You know, this is sort of like hand grenades and horseshoes. You're landing on me. Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'll comment real quick, because I think I understand now what he's asking about. I think Dr. McPhail, you are asking about a separate or different type of plan. You're probably asking about the plans for the new roadway that the city is looking at there, and this does not include that. This is a separate project.
His project directly affects me.
I'm just, yeah.
I understand where you're coming from. I just want to make it publicly aware, our position, where we are. Been here 42 years, we want to stick around, want to stay in.
Got it. Thank you.
I don't want to miss any of these. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on this item? Okay, the floor is now closed to public comment. Does the applicant wish to make any final comments? There may be some questions from the commission as well. Mr. Deerhog, will you please provide the recommendation of staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some observations that I've included in the staff report. I'll just review those at this time. The homes in this project are projected to sell at an average in the mid to high 300s. This is going to represent a high-end product. The homes are going to be oriented to face either Jenkins Street, Jenkins Court, or towards an interior courtyard. The garages and driveways will be oriented towards interior streets, which are going to be meant to function more like alleys. The city of Malden's in the process of redesigning and expanding Jenkins Court to be constructed as a more pedestrian-oriented urban type of street that's typical of what you would experience in a downtown environment. And I think that's what we've heard some concern about here just a moment ago. In addition to that, the city's also working towards the straightening of Jenkins Street, which runs along the top side of this project, so that instead of Jenkins Street curling up to, well, it's not fully shown on here, but you can see that Jenkins Street starts to curl up and ties into Miller Road, that it would be aligned and clean up that intersection. So I just want to make sure that you know about some of the other context of some city projects that are in the works surrounding this project. This development will have 2 separate entrances along the newly designed Jenkins Court. The site is also anticipated to provide a link in the expansion of the Swamp Rabbit Trail through the city of Malden. The project includes a pedestrian trail along the back side of the property that will tie into the future expansion and development of the Swamp Rabbit Trail. Currently on this drawing, the trail is shown as 6 feet wide. However, the city staff does recommend the width of the trail to be at least 12 to 14 feet wide. And the project engineer for the applicant is currently working on incorporating that design. The city generally requires 2 parking spaces per unit in attached single-family housing developments. The city also requires 1.5 parking spaces per unit in a multifamily housing development. This right here has been presented as a attached single-family housing development. And as far as what they're providing in terms of the parking, they're going to have 61 garage parking spaces, another 14 driveway parking spaces, and 12 visitor parking spaces. While this would be okay if it was a multifamily housing project, it's 3 spaces short of the parking requirement for attached single-family housing. So I'll defer to the Planning Commission if you have strong feelings one way or the other, whether this design is acceptable, or if you would like to see them incorporate those 3 extra spaces in this project. I will comment that, as Dr. McPhail indicated, the plans for Jenkins Court is to include some on-street parking. So the 3 spaces that are short on this space could be made up by including parallel parking spaces along Jenkins Court in front of this project. But I'll defer to your preference on that. Oh, you have something to add about that? All right, why don't you come up here?
So for the parking, there's 2 parking spaces per unit. So there's 90 parking spaces, but they're in garages. I don't know if you had that accurate on your.
Okay, maybe I don't have the accurate count for the garage
So
spaces.
there's 45 units, 2 spaces per unit.
So everyone will have a 2-car garage?
Every
Okay.
unit has 2-car garage.
Thank you. Okay. So ignore what I just said. They meet the parking requirement. It's fine. Sorry for that confusion. One other thing I'll note about the driveway is typically you would see in townhome projects or other residential projects for that matter, they would have a 20-foot long driveway. That way it accommodates parking on the driveway. This design is a little different from that. Most of the driveways are only going to be about 7 feet long, which is obviously too short to park a vehicle on. So the expectation with this development project is that vehicles will be parked inside the garage, and there will not be driveways for them to park on. Again, this is more being designed along the type of design you would see in an alley type configuration. Finally, the last thing I'll note is that in a normal subdivision, the city would require a 25-foot setback along the entire perimeter and a 25-foot site triangle at each intersection. However, this is located in the CRD zoning district, which is our central redevelopment district, where the buildings are required to be pushed up to the property line so that they form more of a purposeful edge to the street. And so I just want to make you aware that the intent and the requirements of the CRD district are in conflict with some of those traditional standards that we require. And because we're trying to maintain consistency with the vision and the intent of the CRD district, we are not seeking to apply the requirement for the 25-foot setbacks along the perimeter, as well as we're not seeking to provide the 25-foot site triangle that's typically associated with more suburban type development. You have included in your report the comments that have been provided by the Greenville County Subdivision Advisory Committee. For the most part, these comments entail typical comments that we receive from those agencies that participate on that committee. The one that I'll note here is that Greenville Water has noted they are going to require the applicant to make some improvements to the water system. The staff has reviewed the preliminary plat for compliance with the city's land development regulations and the zoning ordinance. And except as I just noted, staff has found that the development proposal meets or exceeds the minimum standards that are contained therein, and it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. Staff recommends that any approval of this preliminary plat include two conditions. First, that the applicant will satisfy the conditions provided by the Greenville County Subdivision Advisory Committee. And second, that the pedestrian trail that's going to run along the railroad right away, that it'll be at least 12 to 14 feet wide. And that concludes our report.
Thank you. Do any members of the commission have questions for staff?
Yes, I do. Questions concerning Doc McPhail's parking. Are we going to be able to visit the Jenkins Road improvements at a future date? Or is that something that would potentially occur outside of our purview?
That's a good question. So that is something that occurs outside of your purview. That'll be involving our city council.
Okay, got it. So I think the message that I would definitely want to send then would be that if this project is directly impacting the Jenkins improvement project, I would want reassurances on my end that it's not going to negatively affect our local business base.
Everybody always steals my questions.
I'm sorry, jumped on it. The other question I've got is the size of the garages, right? So if this is a 2-car garage, is it like a single door 16-foot car garage that I can fit 1.5 actual cars in, or is it an actual 2-car garage that I could fit my F-150 and a BMW X5 in, right? Because my concern there is that while it may be written up as a 2-car garage, we're going to see significant overflow parking in the street, which will also negatively impact our local businesses.
I'm going to echo that comment too, because it's great to say that just because you have a 7-foot driveway strip that people should not park there, but I've seen plenty of urban townhome developments where people do. They'll pull in, they'll put a little car pulled in parallel up into the front of the driveway or the garage itself. There's extra room along that back side of the property where the trail is going to be going along. I don't see why you couldn't add some more guest parking. In such a high density residential setting, I think putting an emphasis on additional guest parking, especially near an entertainment center, if people are going to be coming to visit you and visit you living in one of these residential units, and then walking over to some of the offerings that the entertainment venue has, I think it would be beneficial to the community to offer additional parking if you have space to do so.
Just to respond to the comments, if I may, from Mr. Barefoot and Ms. Wool.
Sorry, jumped it.
And the applicant can certainly answer the question about the size of the garages, but the room on the back side of the development is a little deceiving. Right now, what they've shown there is a 5 foot wide trail. By the time you expand that to 12 to 14 feet, that will eat up all the space back there. So I just wanted to make sure you have that perspective. But if you're okay, Mr. Chairman, applicant can answer the question about the garages.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm gonna respond to the question Mr. Barefoot brought up about the garages. So each unit will have a 2-car garage. These are garages we've designed and are in use, and they fit 2 cars. If it's a large, say F-250, F-350, I can't guarantee that you could fit that plus another car in the garage. But most of the average size cars we've never had a problem. But to address the concern about cars potentially hanging over in the 7-foot drive, we put it into the HOA covenants that you cannot park into the street or have any part of your car left in the street. So that's how we've handled it in the past, and it's always worked. But ultimately, it will depend on the HOA maintaining that. It'll be written into the covenants. So just wanted to point that out. And then in the rear of the property, I think David described that pretty accurately. There's not as much room as it looks like. We're trying to maintain some green space and allow for the wider trail. Well, we're going to add as many guest spots as we possibly can back there, but what we are showing is what we know we can fit. If we can add more, we'll do it.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Really appreciate that. I guess to staff, then what I'd say is, and not that I don't distrust the two cars in the garage, I would just put out a warning that I feel like people will be looking for additional parking, right? Like if I had a garage, half of it would be a gym, right? So my two cars aren't going to have space. So if the city is concerned about that, I think it would be wise, I think it'd be wise for the city to be concerned about potential overflow parking. Where it goes, I would urge the city to be careful about where they put it and how it impacts our community.
Thanks. Additional questions?
I just have one more quick question so that I can understand the conditions of the Swamp Rabbit Trail. So in this location, the trail is not going to be replacing the rail, right? Because those are still active, an active rail line. So will it be paralleling the tracks right on the edge of the right of way? I guess I'm just trying to understand the property boundary. I see that it jogs in, but even in that location where it jogs in, the trail is still shown on the outside of the parcel boundary. So can you just explain that condition and what's going to be going on there?
Certainly. So you're correct. The trail is not replacing those tracks. They will remain in active use. The trail will be on the developer's property, so it will be outside of the railroad right of way, and will be on their property. So there'll be some green space between the actual railroad tracks and the trail because of the width of the railroad right of way.
Okay. I guess I'm just trying to understand if you're able to fit those guest parking spots in there and have the trail in between the right of way and the parking. It looks like the spatial condition's the same going up. Just going back to my comment to encourage more guest parking for a development like this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just want to double back to the issue with Dr. McPhail's property. I want to make sure, this is a great project. I appreciate the fact that we're not going to be directly discussing Jenkins Court and Jenkins Street redesign with this decision tonight. However, the property itself will require as an ingress egress point Jenkins Court. So in essence, we're approving a redesign of those roads indirectly tonight. So I just want to make sure if there's a way to provide any sort of guarantee that McPhail will not be Dr. McPhail's business will not be negatively affected by this decision tonight, whether that be through the use of either moving that right away, potentially encroaching to the east a little bit, or I guess it would be to the east, just to give that a little bit of extra space on Jenkins so that we know that this development won't have a negative impact on our existing businesses. And I don't know if there's a way to do that tonight. Maybe that's more of a question than it is a statement. And I bring that up to the fellow commission members as well, because I would love to hear some discussion on this, if there's a way that we could possibly do that. I don't know if there is, but that'd be my main concern with this project moving forward, is the negative effect it would have on our existing businesses.
And I'll let you know that the city administrator and the community development director have been more involved with that piece. Expect that they are aware of Dr. McPhail's concerns, but certainly after this evening, I'll make sure that that's passed on to them. They're working with the company Cotransco towards the design of that road. I don't know where they are in the stages of that design. If it's still on the drawing board, I'm sure it is. But we'll pass this on to them so they make sure that they're addressing that.
And since this is a CRD, I think the minimum distances are out the window, right? So we do have the ability, if possible, to push that property line or that street to the right a little bit, or to the east.
That's a concern of mine too. I mean, I think we should be adding value to the city and not taking away from existing businesses, especially when he's been kind of creating an easement by necessity, by default, because his building doesn't meet the setback requirements, I'm pretty sure, for today's standard. And we're kind of putting him in a position where, I mean, his customers are going to struggle to find parking. They'll end up parking illegally somewhere else, or it'll negatively affect his business, where the value of his building is depleted to almost nil. So I don't know if there's a way we can maybe create a variance for them where they can slide some things over and give him an option to purchase a small parcel to bring him in compliance with the setback requirements now, parking requirements.
Well, the setback requirements can be dismissed because it's zoned as the CRD. CRD provides more flexibility because of the type of development that it's trying to encourage. So while I commented in my report about what some of those setback requirements have been in the past townhome type projects, they don't necessarily apply because they're trumped by the CRD standard. As far as, do they need a variance? But, Mr. Chairman, if you're willing to grant the applicant a little more opportunity, you might have a little bit more information and insight about the redesign we're talking about. Jenkins.
Yeah, please. Please come. Let us know.
Just wanted to point out, Dr. McPhail, I haven't met you yet, but nice to meet you. Look forward to a little bit later. I want to point out that the road is something that precedes us getting involved in the project. So I think we all know for the city center project as a whole, it's integral. It's not going to benefit just us. It's going to benefit the entire redevelopment of the city center, including us and then the future growth of that area. While I'm not involved in the design or any of the daily planning on the road, what I know about it is, because it affects our project and how we've had to set it back, the engineers are going to be setting the line, the boundary of the road on Dr. McPhail's side on the property line. And then they're going to be coming over 60 feet towards our townhomes. So that's going to be the boundary of the road and the sidewalks and all that. So it's not going, we're not splitting it down the middle and going into Dr. McPhail's side and coming into ours and splitting the difference. It's going 60 feet into our side of it. And actually we're purchasing property that all of this is on. I guess it's going to be, we need to still figure out the exact mechanism, but this is going to be either deeded to the city or allocated in a permanent easement or a public use easement. But anyway, I just want to make it clear that we're not pushing the boundary into the other property owners to our left. If you're looking at the plan, it's coming into our property. Does that help clear it up at all?
Yeah, I totally see that, but I guess more than anything, is there a way to preserve his investment and preserve his business by giving him, or somehow I mean, it's parcel,
I
unfortunately.
think that's more of maybe a city discussion from my perspective. I mean, the road is needed for ingress egress.
Sure.
We don't need, there's no benefit for me to put sidewalks on Dr. McPhail's property right now. I don't see any reason to limit his parking. It doesn't, I mean, our townhomes and this project will be successful with him still operating just the way he does today. But I can't speak for the city or the plans of the road. I know the road's needed, but we certainly don't need sidewalks going through his parking.
Absolutely.
Mr. Deerhog, can you speak to the timing of, or I guess the status of the roadway realignment plans and what the timeline is for those in terms of, I mean, this is preliminary plat, right? So we'll still have a final plat review. Am I correct in saying that? Will we have more information when we get to that point?
Let me first answer your first question. I don't know the information or the timing on the road. I haven't been directly involved with that work, so I can't answer anything about that. As far as this project though goes, this is the preliminary plat. If you approve the preliminary plat, what that does is it gives the green light to the applicant that the layout that they've presented and the number of units they presented is acceptable. And what their next step will be is to work on the full engineering plans, which are then reviewed by staff. Once the full engineering plans have been approved and meet all of the city's standards and requirements, the applicant's then able to get a permit to actually begin installing all the infrastructure and such for the project. After they've constructed all the infrastructure they're required to put in place, then at that point, they're able to apply for a final plat, but the final plat doesn't come to the planning commission. The final plat is reviewed on a staff level. And at that point, what we're doing is inspecting all the infrastructure that they've installed to make sure they've met all, that it's all been installed correctly. And
Thank you for clarifying that process. That's helpful.
Mr. Chair, and members of the commission, just also keep in mind, we do have the ability to add conditions to this approval, so it's not necessarily as written. We can.
No, I agree. I hear that. But we would be adding conditions to the city, not to this developer.
Correct.
How does that work?
So it's a good
it's a
question.
little hazy.
Yeah, so yeah, we wouldn't be able to tie the hands of anybody but the developer on this process.
That's the problem, right? So that's kind of where I'm running into this. The only, unfortunately for Mr. Parker right now, and this is just me talking, the only way I see of stressing the importance of preserving our existing businesses is by saying that that we can't approve this preliminary plat before we see evidence from the city that they have taken that into account. But that's the only way that I see that working. I may be wrong.
Is that statement correct? Sorry to put you on the spot.
So this is a tricky one. It's tricky in the sense that they're designing this project around road improvements that they are not responsible for and that they are not designing. Often in the other subdivisions that you probably recall that we review, the developer is usually more directly involved with those, and they're working with DOT for the approval of the design, and the developer constructs the improvements to that roadway. This is a little different, which makes it trickier because the city has taken on the responsibility for the improvements along this right of way. And if I didn't say it before, I want to make sure I clarify. Jenkins Court is an existing street and it is an existing right of way. Obviously, the city is working on making improvements in that consistent with its vision for the city center project. The improvements include bringing it up to more of an urban standard with on-street parking, with sidewalks and such, and extending it all the way down through the length of the block. So this is a project that encompasses more than just the frontage of this specific project. It's going to continue to extend down for the length of the block. So going back to your question, trying to figure out what you can require here gets a little tricky because this is not part of the developer.
Yeah. Is there a way that we can see what the city is proposing as far as the street goes?
Possibly. Like I said, I don't know the status of this.
Yeah.
I just haven't been involved with that piece.
Okay.
So just to clarify, in terms of any streetscape improvements that are part of this development, the only thing they are doing is the curb cut of their driveway apron to the existing pavement. They are not doing any other streetscape improvements along Jenkins, or am I misunderstanding? For the scope of their project, the rest of it will fall on the city.
That's correct. not only is the city doing the on-street parking and the sidewalks, but landscaping as well.
Okay. And will this be, I know you don't have all the design information. I know this, I'm assuming this will be more of a secondary neighborhood friendly type urban residential street, because I do worry a little bit about the fact that Dr. McPhail's office, the users are pulling in and then backing out into the street. So I just want to make sure that all these upgrades, they'll still be permitted to do that. I don't know if you have the answers to that yet. But just with the location of this development's driveway, that will make it a little tricky if it's a very highly trafficked road, to allow people to be turning into the development and also backing up out of the parking spots at the veterinary office.
I don't know what that design is.
Okay.
My recommendation would be that, you know, similar to what you see in downtown Greenville, that they incorporate some angled parking there.
Okay.
I think fits with the type of road that the city's trying to design and construct here. But I haven't seen what efforts the other staff and the contractor that the city's working with have made to that. So like you said, you know, right now, Dr. McPhail's business has parking that you pull directly in from the street. Certainly an angled parking configuration would allow that similar type of scenario.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great point too.
Thank you for all the discussion. I can see us having a lot more talks like this as the city grows. Any more questions from the commission for staff?
Actually, I have one more question for the applicant. Sorry. Regarding, it seems to be, the parking seems to be an issue that we have tonight with this proposed development. Obviously, some of these townhomes look to be only 18-foot wide, so I'm assuming that parking two-car garage is front to back, which creates logistic issues. No, obviously, maybe just the on-street parking out in front for additional. I know you've got the HOA requirements that you're putting in the covenants to require, you know, garage parking. Unfortunately, these days and times, it doesn't always work, especially if you have a family that has 3 cars. They've got a teenager that drives. Where's the third car going to go park? Is there any thought to reducing the number of townhome units in this development to allow for some additional extra parking, or a wider product to improve that Boley Street? Can that not be a one-way street to maybe get those driveways a little bit longer? Is that possible as well, or is that not meet a DOT requirement?
DOT. Let me start with the garages, the tandem garages, the stacked tandem, however you want to call it. Those have worked great. The HOA covenants also do not allow any of the residents to park outside in the visitor spots overnight. There are things we can do, and we have done, where you can, as a resident, if you have that third car, you need to park in one of the visitor places, it would be open for consideration to buy a tag that gives you that right to do that. That's when we have enough visitor parking, but my main goal here would be to maintain the visitor parking for visitors. So HOA covenants in our other projects would prohibit anyone from parking outside overnight. They have to be in the garage. If that doesn't work and we're upfront with the buyers as well. That's one of those things that they have to review the HOA covenants, and that's something that they need to be made aware of, because it doesn't work for everybody. A lot of people do have 3 cars, and they need to be able to park that. We can't accommodate that at all times. I mean, if you have, some of these units do have deeper garages, it could accommodate a car in the garage. I mean, in the driveway. If you can fit a car in your driveway, the HOA covenants does not prevent you from doing that. But at 7 feet, I mean, typical parking space is 18 feet long. So we need at least that to be able to address the parking. But I guess to circle all the way around, it really is, the risk is more on us as the developer. Are these units desirable for the people buying them? And history has told us that they're very desirable. And what we do is we take a lot of pride in the projects we do. I don't want to drive by and see one of our projects in the future, cars parked all over the street, and just, it looks terrible. That's why we put very strict covenants in place day one, and really helps prevent that kind of scenario from happening.
So even somebody like one of these end units that's 23.5 foot wide and their driveway is, 16 foot wide, and essentially they could, wide enough to parallel park in their driveway, that would not be allowed.
In their own driveway, they can park outside at night. When I say they can't park outside at night, I mean in the visitor
Okay,
spaces.
so
If it's their property, they can fit without encroaching into the street, then they can park there. Yeah, and we've had those scenarios where if there's enough visitor parking and the HOA votes on it, then they do sell tags to allow people that have a need for that third car, but typically that's not allowed.
so what's a resident supposed to do if they have family come visit? Buy a tag?
So there are visitor tags, yeah. So if you're having someone come in, your family member or friends coming in for the weekend through the HOA, you would just get a tag. It's a hang tag. It helps maintain. It keeps people from parking a third car there that just kind of sits in a parking space. And
I understand that, yeah.
Additional questions? Thanks. Nothing? All good. All right, quite a lot of discussion there. Just to go back and make sure everything's clear, this item is considering a recommendation with regard to the preliminary plat design for Maverick Yards. Mr. Darragh, correct me if I'm wrong here. Staff recommends approval with the conditions the applicant shall satisfy conditions provided by the Greenville County Subdivision Advisory Committee, and that the pedestrian trail adjacent to the railroad right-of-way shall be at least 12 to 14 feet wide. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do I hear a motion regarding this item?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve with the two conditions as staff has stated.
Thank you. I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Foreman with the two conditions stated by staff. Do I hear a second?
I'll second the motion with the conditions stated by staff.
Thank you. I have a second from Commissioner Willard. I'd like to call for a vote. Mr. Darragh, can you please help me with a roll call vote?
Yes, sir. And we'll start back on Zoom this round. Start with Commissioner Barefoot,
Nay.
Commissioner Woolard,
Aye.
Commissioner Foreman,
Aye.
Commissioner Pagliulunga, Commissioner Sofield,
Nay.
and Commissioner Paulson.
Aye.
That passes by a vote of 4-2 with Commissioner Sofield, Commissioner Barefoot in opposition.
Thank you. Thanks for the good discussion. That was the last item on our agenda for this evening. Is there any other business?
There is one thing I need your input on as a planning commission. we are anticipating having meetings in November and December. And so I wanted to take just a moment to talk calendar with you if I can. Typically, we meet the fourth Tuesday of each month. And in November, that meeting would coincide with, that meeting would be November 23rd, which is the week of Thanksgiving. In December, that meeting would be December 28th, which is the Tuesday after Christmas. Wanted to see if it's the desire of the Planning Commission to adjust their meeting dates for November and December. One option we could do is to move that to the third Tuesday of those months, or 1 month or the other, which would throw the November meeting onto November 16th, which is more than a week before Thanksgiving, and the December meeting onto December 21st, which is the Tuesday before Christmas, falling on a Saturday. I wanted to just throw that out there and see if the Planning Commission had any preference.
I know that I won't be available on the 28th, so I would prefer the dates you just mentioned.
My only question would be advertising. Would that affect our requirements?
No, we'll be able to make that work.
I'm in favor of moving the December because I know I won't be here. I will not be able to make the 16th if we do move that one.
You're saying move the December from the 28th to the 21st, but you're saying in November you will not be available on the 16th.
Yes, yeah.
What was the original date of the November meeting?
The 23rd. So that would be the Tuesday evening, and then you would have Thanksgiving 2 days later. And so just so you know what we're anticipating for November, we're anticipating a rezoning. We just received the application today along East Butler Road. It's at 301 East Butler. You might recognize this is immediately next to a property we just rezoned on East Butler earlier this year. And then in December, we're anticipating we might get a application for rezoning for a planned development over where the potentially where the costume place is on Fairfield and South Main Street.
Okay, so items to discuss.
Yes.
I certainly wouldn't want to make any schedule that precluded attendance, but it is the holidays.
Yeah, and I won't be able to make the November one if we keep it on the 23rd, because I'll be in an area with no cell or internet connection.
I'm open to any suggestions that would preclude at least one person from being absent. If not, we could move it to the 16th.
November does have an extra day. If it worked better for everyone, we could also consider November 30th. That's actually has a 5th Tuesday that month. That would be the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. I don't know if that makes it better or worse for anyone.
I'm okay with that.
I'm fine with that too.
The 30th works for me.
Well, then what we'll expect to do is we'll plan for a planning commission meeting on November 30th. And then in December, a planning commission meeting on December 21st.
Thank you. No more business?
That's it. Thank you.
I'll entertain any motions to adjourn at this time. So moved. I have one. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Good night, Mr. Barefoot and Miss Woolard.
Good night. Thank you.
No, thank you.